Hello, thought I'd try something a little bit differently today. Recording an audio commentary track for a movie that I found to be incredibly fascinating. It's Biggles Adventure in Time. It's sort of a movie I wish I had seen a lot earlier, because I find it to be just incredibly entertaining, but also very interesting. Listening here to the music for the opening, which you'll get used to over the course of the film. It's repeated quite a few times and in some places that are not entirely appropriate. This is based on a lot of short stories and novels written by Captain W.E. Johns. He wrote 98 of them, based on both himself and other World War I pilots. This movie, as you could probably guess, is not based on any of them. The movie is directed by John Hugh, who was a fan of the Biggles books as a child, but did not come up with the idea to make this. This was sort of forced upon him. He's probably more well known for his horror films such as American Gothic, which shares some of the cast with this movie. Seeing him in interviews, he reminds me a lot of Donald Cotton's mannerisms. Well, he even looks like him a bit. Cotton is pretty obscure, but he's the co-creator of Adam Adamant and also one of 260's Doctor Who writers who died falling down the stairs. Here we have Debbie, played by Fiona Hutchison, probably best known for her sporadic appearances in the soap opera Guiding Light. Alex Hyde White as Jim, who originally got a start under contract appearing in Universal things, but also branching out into TV shows like Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers. Although he's probably best known for appearing in a movie that didn't actually get released, the 1994 Fantastic Four film. Here we have Peter Cushing. This is his last film role, although it's not his last appearance in something. I'll get more onto that later, because it's not unrelated. A lot of great atmosphere in these scenes. Funny enough, Alex Hyde White played the young double for Henry Jones Sr. in The Last Crusade, which, the movie will be brought up again. It's a lot of interesting connection. Although it's interesting that the character of Jim doesn't know a lot about planes or anything, but he has a giant propeller on his wall. The shots in this little courtyard thing, they look a lot better without the giant, hideous typeface of the opening credits above it. It's interesting, that thing on the wall there behind him. It looks almost like a framed autograph or something like that. Although it's a bit too hard to tell what it is. Probably just a plaque or something like that. There's some nice foreshadowing being built up with Peter Cushing's character being too early. Sort of foreshadows the upcoming events. That's probably the best shot of that plaque there behind him. Still hard to tell what it is. One thing I'm glad they really took advantage of in these scenes is lighting. I think Peter Cushing's face is just sort of perfect for harsh shadows. It has so many angles, and it's quite well defined. I think that's part of the reason why he was such a well-used actor in horror films and whatnot. Well, mostly due to his acting abilities, but I think there's something about him that's just a little bit off in, like, a good way. Jim has a perfectly natural response to someone being so absolutely bizarre at his doorstep. Just simple confusion. Weirdo indeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jim Ferguson, and as president of Celebrity Dinners, it gives me the greatest pleasure to welcome you here today.
The idea of TV dinners being just covered in celebrities on the boxes is somewhat of a incredibly 80s idea, although it is the sort of marketing that continues today. The lightning effects aren't exactly convincing, even compared to earlier films that tried the same sort of thing, but they work with the right lighting in these shots. The plane is a bit more convincing than its sound effects. Here we have Biggles, played by Neil Dixon, who didn't have exactly a very vast film career, but he's appeared in a lot of television, beginning in the UK and then continuing on in the United States. He was in I, Claudius, Blake 7, ended up being in Matlock and Baywatch and Sliders, ironically enough. There's lots of voice work as well.
Let's move.
Very nice explosion there. Gives a lot more scale to something that would otherwise be a rather small-looking scene. I think Dixon is an excellent casting choice for this role. He has a real Peter O'Toole look to him, especially with his aviator's cap off.
Thanks for your help.
Funny enough, he had actually asked his agent to be part of this film. Much to his surprise, he got the starring role. Much like John Hugh, the director, he was very fond of these books. I like how Biggles hand waves away Jim's clothing as sort of an American eccentricity. This American versus British sensibilities is sort of a running theme throughout the whole movie. There's a lot of interesting comparisons.
Come on.
Wait a minute. This is ridiculous. Hey, what the hell am I doing here? What's going on?
And back to present day. Some stock footage of New York. Most of the exterior shots were filmed in the United Kingdom. Some traditional 1980s film bums. Bit of a trope at this point.
Morning, Judy.
Good morning. Please need seeing to me to play.
Over there in the tie is William Hootkins, who's
I know,
in
I'm sorry, I'm late.
a lot of films, although usually just in supporting roles. And most of the time, a lot of jokes made at his expense for being either incredibly overweight or just being American. He's in a lot of larger blockbusters like Raiders of the Lost Ark and Star Wars, Flash Gordon, Batman. Sort of funny that there's sort of a reunion between him and Peter Cushing, both being in Star Wars, although I don't think they share a scene in this movie. Which, fair enough, they didn't share one in the other film either.
Looks fantastic.
Here we have Chekhov's drumstick. Keep an eye out for that. He was even cast as Fatty Arbuckle in a biopic, although he died before they could finish it, or even start it. Sort of a curse of all actors who are cast in the role. He joins the ranks of John Candy, Chris Farley, John Belushi. He even met Arbuckle's last wife, Andy MacPhail, while he was researching for the film. She was a famous actress in her own right. It's funny how they make Hootkin's character, Chuck, to be this sort of useless person who was just appointed there due to his father, but the movie doesn't make the obvious comparison between that sort of nepotism and the sort of nepotism present in the officer corps of the First World War. The movie's not exactly self-aware in that regard. The movie sort of has the same romantic view of the First World War that the books it's loosely based on have, which is to be expected from books written between 1920 and 1968 by an RAF captain. Camera work in this scene in particular is really well done.
Just give me a moment with this, man.
Adds a lot of tension to what would otherwise be a very dull scene. The ambient music as well works surprisingly well for just being this sort of synth. The Dutch angles really change up the whole look of the office. Same with the slight movement of the handheld camera for some of those lower angles of Jim.
Why did you say that?
We can see Peter Cushing's sort of signature gloves in one of these shots. Right there, he takes one off. Mark Hamill often repeats the story of when he met Peter Cushing on the set of Star Wars. by just wandering in one day when he was working and asking him a whole bunch of questions and really acting like a fanboy for him.
I was in my living room trying to write a speech.
Seems he wore the gloves to
Next thing I knew,
prevent
I
the
was
smell and the
somewhere.
detritus from smoking cigarettes to end up on other people's hands when he shook them, which is goes to show how much of a gentleman he really was. Cushing does a really good job of keeping his character to be still somewhat ambiguous, even though we know who he is. He makes it so his intentions aren't exactly clear to the audience.
Bombing and the plane blew up.
Like, why is he asking all these questions? What's he up to? What's with all the time travel stuff? It's funny, Cushing having his last film be one about time travel. Back in the 60s, he had played Doctor Who, and
No, the plane blew up.
those two Aru Dalek films. Now we get one of my absolutely favorite lines in this movie that just
Whoever the hell you are,
cracks
do you
me up
mind
every
telling me
time.
What's going on here?
Jim, we got a glitch in the mashed potatoes.
Just a minute, Bill, please.
Something else will happen to you. You must come to London.
London? Are you crazy?
My address is on the card. Good day, Mr. Ferguson.
The whole setting of this party looks almost like one of those CGI renders of the back rooms with all the arches and pools and just corridors that seem to go nowhere. It's very bizarre and sort of architecture that you'd only see in the 80s. This is Maxine Fine, played by Ellie B. Parsons from the Aliens movies and also on Space 1999.
So, is this it? Breaking into the big time, eh?
I think she does a really good job at making a very memorable character out of a role that's so small.
Silicone implants?
Oh, you mean the cover, huh? That's market research for you. We're replacing it with a new one.
Not much nose. Consumers want a lot of nose in their dinners.
Certainly
Oh,
work.
there's a return of the chicken.
What the hell?
Look, let me get you another dinner.
No, it's okay. At least somebody wanted to eat it. I'm not so sure about the corn, though. It looks a little bit like, dog puke.
This is fine. You know your customers will tell you this is the finest dog puke they've ever tasted.
Now, a lot of these upcoming plane shots were filmed over the English Midlands, which is somewhat apparent when you see the anachronistic buildings that wouldn't be built for another half century.
What do you mean, one way?
The Germans have a new weapon. One that caused me to crash. I'm gonna try and take another photograph. They may try to use the weapon against us. Make yourself useful.
Another amazing thing about time travel movies is the limitations of the time period. It's not as simple for them to defeat the Germans. They have to use, turn of the century technology.
Look for what?
Here's the great arch rival to Biggles, von Stalheim, who is very obviously, reminiscent of Baron von Richthofen, the famous Red Baron. Face helmet to shield the actual stunt pilot. Now, the German plane is actually a Boeing Stearman G.A. Roy, which wasn't made until the 1930s. But likewise, the Biggles' plane is a Stamp SV4, which also wasn't made until the 30s, but appeared in, well, actually the exact plane appeared in Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. It's the biplane they use. Now, a lot of these shots were filmed by the second unit director, Terry Coles, who had done similar work for the Battle of Britain movie. the stamp was flown by Stuart Goldspink, whereas the Stearman was actually piloted by a former World War II bomber named John Jordan. And as you're listening, you're hearing the opening theme playing yet again, which was blended in nicely, but just fades to no music at all, which is very strange. Now, part of the reason why I find it so funny that the comparison to Indiana Jones and Last Crusade is that these dogfight scenes look so much better, even though they were made at a fraction of the budget and, you know, a few years earlier even. And also the connection with the actors and the actual airplane itself. Some amazing stunt work in this. It's clear that the people making this movie had a lot of affection for these sorts of scenes. And also some nice shots as they fly through the woods, which appears to be a tighter squeeze than it probably was. More than likely they would have had plenty of clearance on either side of the planes, as you can sort of see in some of the shots. As of 2021, both of these planes still existed. As far as I know, they still do. We're going to get to see the ominous super weapon. There it is. It's actually just a fiberglass dish mounted on a mobile crane. It's filmed at the former London Brick Company works near Brogborough, Bedfordshire. Trench scenes are also will also film there. They do a really good job of keeping the super weapon just hidden enough with the either the grass or the netting in the foreground. And also somewhat of effective showing its effects on the planes. Although it does do a much better job later on, as I'm sure I'll point out. Perhaps you should try spinning. I've heard that's a good trick. I find this to be one of the other funniest parts in the film, where as soon as Biggles lets go of the controls, the plane just spirals to the ground. Jim's obviously not doing anything, and he doesn't appear to be bothered by it, judging by his expression. Just sort of blissfully accepts the fate. And the plane rights itself again. Now, some of the more traditional music, I think, fits a bit better with this time period. And I think we could have introduced the more modern music into the the 1917 setting of it. But I think that would have worked much better at the climax of the film rather than this early on. I think keeping both of these time periods having a distinct musical identity would have worked much better to the film. I think that's probably its main drawback, is the soundtrack. Although it has like excellent music by a lot of really renowned artists made specifically for this film, it's doesn't use them as best as it could have. Now this here is going to be one of the few moments where the exact rules of the time travel doesn't quite fit. So you'll learn later that it happens when each of the people of the time twins are in trouble. It seems that Jim was only in trouble of just falling over a little bit.
I can't explain it. Jimmy, you gotta get away from me. Just stay away from me.
And off Jim goes. Nice bit of contrast between the World War I airplanes and this modern passenger jet. I think the film could have done a little bit more of that contrast. Here we are on the famous Tower Bridge, which gets a lot of good use in this film. Really like all these interior mechanisms. It's very very H.G. Wells. It really looks like the 60s version of the time machine. All the gears and gyros and little brass instruments. It's very nice. It's a strange shot, that sort of upward shot of him knocking. Probably was too tight to film it from any other angle.
I've been expecting you, Mr. Ferguson.
It's interesting that this apartment has a massive fireplace when on the actual bridge there's no actual chimneys. Now, there's an interesting discrepancy between the age of Peter Cushing and the age of the character that he's playing, and even the age that they had assumed that the character would be in the script. Cushing himself was born in 1913, and would have been way too young to have served in the First World War. But in the script, they had aged him older, but had only specified that he would be 80, which would have made him only 12 at the end of the war. So realistically, he'd be playing a character much older than that, probably well into his 90s. Part of that made me think of this, him trying to be the character of the captain was a bit of a ruse. When I first watched this movie, I thought that he would actually be von Stalheim, but just sort of trying to mess with history by using the whole time twin thing.
What are these guys, a vaudeville act?
Indeed not. They were four of the bravest men it's been my privilege to know. We all owe a great deal of the freedom we now take for granted to men like them.
Yeah, so what's this got to do with me?
You gave this card to Biggles.
Cards in plastic? No, it's not.
How the hell did you get this?
And back to being in
Biggles
plastic.
gave it to me.
One of the many little continuity slip-ups in this film.
I just gave Biggles that card 2 nights ago. Do you mean that was 1917?
Time travel is not unknown in history. There's evidence that it happens more often than anyone suspects.
Cushing just sort of waves away the whole time travel premise of the film. Just like, oh, never mind that, never mind that. It's not important.
I think Biggles is your time.
Which, with a premise as silly as this, yeah, you kind of have to.
Listen, you got anything stronger than tea?
It's also interesting, Cushing's tie is from the Royal Flying Club. He had specifically asked for that to be used.
The second time I went back, Biggles and I were on a
Which,
recon mission. And, when I returned,
thankfully,
I
the
told him that.
production crew was able to find.
Tell you what the photograph is.
In the making of documentary, he takes a lot of pride in that fact.
Biggles seemed real concerned about it.
I'll have this photograph processed. Mr. Ferguson, time has come for action.
What kind of action?
I've prepared something for you.
What for?
Your next trip back. This time, we'll send you to the battlefield properly equipped.
Now, it's an interesting limitation that this movie has on its time travel, is that you can only
The enemy has
take
the
back what
technical
is
that allows them to break through the Allied
what you're
lines.
holding,
And Germany
and within
can
your
win
immediate
the
vicinity that
History
you're touching.
will be altered, and you'll be stuck in 1970.
Obviously, it doesn't take like the dirt from under his feet, but it's all the stuff in his hands and everything is all he can take,
This is getting crazier.
which
You must not fail. I've arranged for you to stay
at least for the moment stops them from bringing back a whole bunch of
and I'll have
modern
the
equipment.
contact you in time.
Of course, later it'll bring a helicopter back to 1917, but oddly enough, it doesn't bring any of the airplanes or anything that he's in
Biggles is a fine
back into
officer.
the present when he's standing inside of one. Some more New York,
I really don't understand.
just from the establishing shots.
Psychosis, trauma. Says so right.
This book that he's holding doesn't appear to be a real book,
Diseases of
or at least
mind. I've been
that's not
reading
what
all
it's
that.
actually called. It's probably a real book underneath the dust jacket.
Psychosis, trauma, syndrome.
But
Jim's not
diseases of the mind is
scared. It's got something to do with
not
that man
real.
who came to see him yesterday. I'm afraid it's some kind of blackmail or
Character of Bill in the center here is
Hello?
played by Alan Polanski, who
Where are you?
is in quite a few films and is even in some stuff up until recently, but is probably best known for being in Aliens, which is another bit of shared casting.
What's going on?
It's personal, honey, and I can handle it.
Look, I can be on the next plane.
Debbie, listen to me. No way. Absolutely not. I'll be home in a few days. I promise you. Just say hi to the gang for me.
You see, guys like Jim, pushy overachievers, they store up stress. And it builds up and builds inside them until they just snap.
I'm going to London.
I'm going with you. Oh, me too.
No, Bill, somebody's got to stay.
Obviously leaving the more sensible choice
I'll take Chuck.
at the office, and taking the
Is as good as cured.
bumbling buffoon with her.
Keep a tight asshole.
More local news for the London area. Continuing throughout the night. Motorists are warned of high winds and possible flooding. Thames Water Authority have issued their normal warnings, but the Thames barrier is, of course, not.
But try as he might, Jim can't seem to predict the whole time stuff very well. So even when he does prepare, it's in vain.
Oh, excuse me, sir. I didn't see you there. I'll come back later.
Here the sidekicks roll up. Hootkin is wearing an Inverness cloak, which to more casual people would be reminiscent of Sherlock Holmes. But in a movie with time travel and Peter Cushing, it's probably more of a reference to John Pertwee's take on the Doctor. Queen's Another One Bites the Dust. One nun asks if he's Jesus Christ, but in French. Which is understandable under the circumstances, with the very obvious parallel to the crucifix hanging on the wall. And here we have some of the rest of Biggles' sidekicks. The one with the monocle, with the sort of Charlie McCarthy look, is
Belgie and Jim Ferguson.
Lord Bertie Leslie, played by James Saxon, who is
You're Bertie, right?
probably
Algie?
best known for getting stabbed in the heart in the Two Doctors.
Faces, but monocles I never forget.
How did you get here?
You wouldn't believe it.
Try us.
I fell through a hole in time.
Oh, you can do better than
It's the truth.
Ginger. The Ginger is played by Daniel Flynn, who was in a few things, but is probably better known now for being a voice in Bloodborne and Dark Souls.
Come on, we don't carry identification.
Why are you wearing a towel?
Because I was taking a bath.
Lord Algie is played by Michael Silbury, who surprisingly is in a lot of Sherlock Holmes stuff, starting with The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes from 1984, and appearing in a bunch of other things in between, and then eventually being in
We're 10 miles behind
Elementary.
the Germans. We're here to meet someone who has information about the German weapon.
Could we start by getting me some clothes, please? It's freezing in here.
Now, Maria is played by Francesca Gonschall, who, funny enough, played a character named Maria in the TV show Hello, Hello at the same time, even. I think she's probably held in higher regard for her theater work. Now, there is an actual character named Maria in one of the Biggles novels, Orchard for Biggles, I think it's called, but the character is unrelated. They don't seem to be even based on the same character. I think it's just a generic name that they use for the movie. Although there is another character named Mary Ann who's a little bit closer, but still not an exact match. I don't think this film gives enough time to this romance. It sort of just happens and has an emotional ending that doesn't quite have enough build-up to it. Although what we do have is very well acted, and it does have a sort of very efficient tenderness. I just don't think there's enough screen time given to it to warrant the payoff that tries to give it.
Don't become a nun. Yet.
I haven't.
When this is over, I'll come back for you, I promise.
The location footage for what is Belgium was filmed in March of 1985. This courtyard was made from a building called Holdenby House, whereas all the scenes in the church or in the graveyard were made up of a nearby church. The extras for these scenes were made up of just local people from the area.
We can't make a scrap of it in here. Not with these people.
Nehmen Sie ihn!
Von Stalheim returns. He was played by Marcus Gilbert, who, funny enough, appeared alongside Peter Cushing in a TV movie called Masks of Death. But he's probably better known for being in Rambo 3 and Army of Darkness. This is an excellent scene that shows almost the chemistry between the two characters. It's they have a sort of rapport where it's sort of a gentleman's war, where both are exceedingly kind to each other, but approach the whole thing from completely different perspectives. Von Stalheim is in it for the glory, whereas Biggles, while certainly indulgent, is more so interested in securing a peace. Interesting little bit of character work in this one scene.
I knew.
It could only be the great Biggles. To the gods of war.
To peace.
I'd rather finish you.
They even managed to get a few digs into each other before von Stalheim just completely gets fed up and orders Biggles to be executed.